to Gaius, Nosferatu Ductus of the Skin-taker Pack.
Hello, Gaius. I'm sorry to report you have a traitor in your midst. The source of the coordinated attack on the Redeemer is none other than your dear Lady Melanthia. My dossier on the matter is enclosed, as well as new details on her ladyship's accomplice, an elder of Clan Toider known as Amelia Devon. It was through Amelia that Melanthia obtained access to Sheriff Yates of Paris, who, as you know, led the attack on the Redeemer himself. I expect this revelation will come as a shock to you, given the deep bonds of Vaudry you and Melanthia share, so please pardon me in cautioning you not to repeat the spectacle you made following the death of Bishop Navarro. There is, after all, a distinct limit on the number of flayed corpses one can effectively hide. For ease of payment, I have also included further information on the 4 artifacts we discussed. Knowledge within the Camarilla and the Sabbat flows deep, but is necessarily kept in separate wells. I seek your sex records on these artifacts, in particular their last known locations. Call it yet another scholastic collaboration between record keepers. What is mine, I now make yours, though you should know the information is by nature incomplete. The first artifact is known as the Eye of Hazamel. This is because, according to the myths of the Ravnos, it is quite literally the eye of a Methuselah of that name. Before his embrace, Hazamel was the guardian of an ancient, unknown goddess. He betrayed her in some great way, some say even to her death, and at his grief tore out his eye from his skull. He then fled to the mountains, where he there met the Ravnos antediluvian, who offered him a chance for vengeance against those who had induced him to betray his goddess. Hazamel acquiesced, accepting embrace for revenge, and in the transformation of death, his eye became imbued with incredible power. The known qualities ascribed to the eye are the ability to tell truth from falsehood, to annihilate both living and inanimate objects with but a glance, and alter any living and undead flesh one sees at will. Many other, more terrible powers are suspected. To wield this power, the one in possession of the artifact must remove their own eye and replace it with the Eye of Hazamel. For his part, it is said Hazamel wore it as a talisman around his neck, and placed it back into his head only when occasion required it. We move now from body parts to immortal scrolls. The second artifact is the Sargon Fragment, which has had quite the journey through history and has proved harder to kill than a cockroach in winter. The fragment is just one part of a larger scroll, allegedly composed by the Cappadocian antediluvian, who was of unsound mind even before his embrace. This mad human mage, known only to us as Cappadocius, sought to devour God himself, and in his quest to diabolarize the great creator, he fashioned and recorded a ritual known as the Anointing, which would grant godhood to the one who successfully performed it. Unfortunately for dear old Cappadocius, he was embraced before his ritual could be completed, and embraced with such violence that his memory was shattered. He could not recall where he had hidden his precious magical scrolls. He and his ill-fated children scoured the earth for thousands of years, searching for his masterwork, only to fail miserably. Parts of Cappadocius's work surfaced prior to the Middle Ages, known now in records as the Sargon Codex, only to be lost once more. In the 1600s, rumors surfaced of a fragment, a transcribed piece of parchment said to contain the anointing ritual, being held in the Vatican at the behest of the Camarilla. But in 1666, this fragment was stolen. By who? No one knows. And yet the fragment pops up again, a few years later, this time in the hands of an entity known only as the Capuchin, an enigmatic and dangerous figure, notorious for sowing disharmony wherever it goes, and who is suspected for having ties to the Giovanni. This personage loses the fragment to the Great Fire of London, and all written accounts so far agree that it was destroyed. But what is lost may yet be found, and it is whispered that the fragment yet remains, only now within the Shadowlands. I know from my sources that the necromancer Ambrogio Giovanni seeks it there, in that place beyond the veil. He may have already recovered it, in which case its location is as much a Sabbat priority as it is a Camarilla one. The third artifact is, as I recall, the one that piqued your interest the most, it being a sword, and you, Gaius, having such a predilection for cutlery. The Sword of Null is, at first glance, a simple bronze weapon. A blade attached to a workmanlike hilt, upon which a carved skull is the only ornamentation. But looks do so often deceive, and the blade is the sharpest of any in existence, forged in infernal fires by the demon Dragonskir. There is no waking kindred on earth whose thirst for blood is greater than the Sword of Null. Whoever grasps its hilt becomes the greatest and deadliest of warriors. It consumed the Ventru Methuselah, Tiamat, who wielded it in a desperate attempt to defeat the Gangrel Methuselah, Urion, in the first great battle of the Jihad. Tiamat defeated Urion, but her victory was indeed short. After the battle, the blade turned upon her own army and led her to slaughter her own people. She sacrificed herself in order to cast the sword and the demon who made it into the river Tigris. And her efforts were not entirely in vain. The sword remained lost for thousands of years, only to be recovered in the 9th century by a human warrior of the Assad Caliphate. This man used the sword to wipe out entire rebel troops before he was felled by an arrow to the throat. It then passed from beggar to scholar to thieving Bruja, who secreted the sword from Baghdad to Jerusalem, only to die shortly thereafter in a crusade fire. The sword then passed into Europe as a spoil of war, to be sniffed out by the Tremere in the 15th century. There it remained for hundreds of years, within the lockbox of the Vienna chantry, to be meticulously studied until it was stolen by a Malkavian of an unknown name and origin not too terribly long ago. The lunatic slaughtered a great number of the Tremere's deadliest pets before fleeing with the weapon. He is, by all accounts, hiding somewhere in America. Call it intuition, but I trust the Sabbat have an idea where to find a rogue Malkavian with a blade forged in hell. The fourth and final artifact is the most mysterious, the Ankaran Sarcophagus. The records disagree on its time and area of origin, but most concur that it was likely made in ancient Sumer, Mesopotamia. Julius of Gaul discovered it in 1068, writing that it was a nefarious and dread thing, full of some ancient and undeniable evil. His reasoning for describing it thus were the sudden and violent convulsions that seized his scribe as soon as the young man laid eyes on the sarcophagus. Julius subsequently re-entombed it, and wrote nothing further concerning it or its history. We do know the carvings on it depict figures drinking bowls of blood, which does suggest vampirism. My girls have uncovered information suggesting that the sarcophagus may carry the body of Messerek, the one-eyed king, who was a ruler of Assyria. I should think you would be vastly more interested in the corpse, Gaius, so I myself would be perfectly pleased to obtain the sarcophagus itself. Whatever it is a mystery, and I do so love a great mystery. If anything, it whiles away the time. I expect your reply by the usual route. As always, it is a pleasure doing business with one who does not disregard the benefits of clan. May you walk through the shadow of the hungry, untouched. Madam Filth, Clan Nosferatu. London,
November 1943.